Yokosuka Naval Base, Japan. Officers' Mess Hall, Building 14, August 19, 1971. Thursday afternoon, 1:20 p.m. The mess hall at Yokosuka serves approximately 400 personnel across the lunch period, and on a Thursday in August, it is running at close to that capacity, which means the noise level inside Building 14 has reached the specific volume produced by 400 people, conducting 400 separate conversations simultaneously inside a space whose ceiling height and wall composition were engineered for function rather than acoustics. A volume that is not quite loud enough to require raising your voice, but loud enough that every conversation exists inside a kind of ambient pressure that makes sustained attention slightly more demanding than it would be elsewhere. The smell is institutional food at scale. Coffee that has been on the burner long enough to develop opinions. The particular warm, metallic scent of a commercial kitchen operating at full capacity behind the serving line. The undertone of the sea, which at Yokosuka is never entirely absent regardless of which building you are in, because the base sits at the edge of Tokyo Bay, and the bay is always present in the air, whether or not you're looking at it. The tables are long aluminum rectangles arranged in parallel rows with attached bench seating on both sides, designed for maximum capacity rather than comfort. And on this Thursday afternoon, most of them are occupied to the point where finding a seat requires either patience or the willingness to ask strangers to shift. She is sitting at the far end of the third table from the east wall. She arrived 12 minutes ago, and she ordered what she always orders when she eats at Yokosuka, which is the simplest thing available, because the simplest thing available at a naval base mess hall is reliably better than the complicated things, and she is eating it with the focused economy of a person who regards eating as a functional requirement rather than a social activity, and who has learned through years of institutional meals to execute that requirement efficiently without drawing attention to the efficiency. She is wearing civilian clothes, dark slacks, a plain navy blue jacket over a simple white shirt, flat shoes. Her hair is pulled back. She is carrying nothing that identifies her. No name badge, no rank insignia, no visible credential of any kind. She looks to the several hundred people eating lunch around her who have noticed her at all, which is not many of them because she is not doing anything that invites notice, like a civilian contractor or a civilian family member of someone stationed at the base. The category of person that a naval installation like Yokosuka hosts in sufficient numbers that their presence in the mess hall during lunch is unremarkable. She is 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighs 140 pounds. She is Bruce Lee. The reason she is at Yokosuka is not a reason that will appear in any public account of her visit, and it is not a reason that requires detailed explanation here beyond the fact that a conversation she was invited to have with a group of military personnel interested in martial arts application had been arranged through private channels and had concluded an hour ago, and that she is eating lunch before the drive back to Tokyo because she did not eat before the morning's meeting, and the meeting ran longer than the scheduled time. The pronoun in the preceding sentence is deliberate. The accounts of this evening that exist in the specific community of people who were present use it consistently. The reasons for it belong to Bruce and not to this account, and will not be elaborated on here beyond acknowledging that on this particular Thursday in August 1971, the person eating lunch at the far end of the third table from the east wall of Building 14 at Yokosuka Naval Base is presenting to the world in a way that the world is reading as female, and the world is reading it this way because it is this way, and because Bruce has always moved through the world with the specific quality of intention that makes what Bruce intends to communicate itself without requiring assistance. The sailor's name is Petty Officer First Class Daniel Marsh. He is 24 years old, and he has been stationed at Yokosuka for 14 months, which is long enough to have developed the specific territorial familiarity with the base's spaces that long-term stationed personnel develop, the sense of ownership over the routines and the rhythms of a place that has become the primary geography of a person's daily life. He is 6 feet tall and weighs 215 pounds, and he played defensive end for 2 years at a community college in Ohio before enlisting, and the physical confidence that those 2 years and 14 months of naval service have produced in him is the specific confidence of a young man who has not yet encountered a situation where that confidence was insufficient. He is carrying his tray through the mess hall looking for a seat at 1:18 p.m. and finding, as most people find at this hour on a Thursday, that the available options are more limited than he would prefer. He identifies a seat at the far end of the third table from the east wall. The seat is next to Bruce. He arrives at the seat and sets his tray down and swings his leg over the bench, with the physical ease of a large person who has not yet been required to be careful about the space he occupies. The ease that is the physical expression of a worldview organized around the assumption that the space required for a body like his is the space that exists, not the space that is negotiated. The swing of his leg makes contact with Bruce's tray, not catastrophically. The contact is sufficient to shift the tray several inches toward Bruce and to displace the coffee cup, which tips but does not fall, but which distributes a portion of its contents across the surface of the tray and across the edge of Bruce's jacket sleeve. Marsh looks at what happened. He looks at Bruce. He makes the assessment that he makes in the automatic way that people make assessments of other people, quickly and from the available surface information, and the assessment he makes from the available surface information is the assessment that the available surface information is designed by years of cultural conditioning to produce in a person like Marsh, looking at a person presenting the way Bruce is presenting. Small civilian, female, alone. The categories arrange themselves in his assessment in the order that produces the specific response he delivers, which is not an apology and is not an acknowledgement and is not the standard social repair that the situation would conventionally call for, but is instead a version of the look that large people who have not yet been required to be careful give small people who have been inconvenienced by their carelessness, a look that acknowledges the inconvenience while simultaneously communicating that the inconvenience is not a matter the large person regards as requiring significant response. He picks up his fork. He begins eating. Bruce looks at the coffee on her sleeve. She looks at the tray. She looks at Marsh. Her expression does not change from the expression it carried before the tray was displaced, which is the expression of a person eating lunch in a mess hall, present and attentive, and without particular emotional content. She picks up a napkin. She addresses the coffee on her sleeve with the same economy she brings to everything. She does it without drama, without the performative patience that people sometimes produce in these situations to communicate their restraint. She simply addresses it and sets the napkin down. Marsh has not looked at her again. There are people at the table who have been watching the sequence of events with the ambient awareness that people in crowded shared spaces maintain of the social dynamics immediately around them. Awareness that is not focused attention, but that registers significant events and stores them in the accessible part of memory. 2 sailors 3 seats down from Bruce, a civilian contractor across the table and 4 seats toward the center, a petty officer at the end of the bench who is reading something and eating simultaneously and whose reading has paused. None of them know who Bruce Lee is. None of them have any reason to expect that what is about to happen is about to happen. What prompts the escalation is something small, and for that reason something that the witnesses will spend time afterward trying to understand why it mattered, as much as it apparently did to the person it mattered to. Bruce asks quietly and without particular emphasis whether Marsh would like to acknowledge what happened. Not an accusation, not a demand, a question, delivered in a tone that carries the specific quality of a genuine inquiry, the tone of a person who is curious about the answer rather than certain of it. Marsh hears it. He turns and looks at Bruce again. He performs the assessment again, small, civilian, female, alone, and now in his assessment, a source of a social complication that he did not invite and does not feel he is responsible for managing. He says something. The witnesses differ on the specific language, but agree on the substance. He says something that communicates that the question was not one he feels required to answer, that the situation as he understands it does not represent a significant inconvenience to anyone that he is obligated to address, and that the person asking the question is not someone whose asking of the question he regards as carrying the weight that would require him to respond to it differently than he is responding to it. He says it in a way that includes a reference to the specific category of person he has assessed Bruce to be. Bruce is quiet for a moment. In the accounts of people who were close enough to observe her face in this moment, what they describe is not anger, not the visible heat of someone who has been insulted and is responding to the insult from the place where insults land. They describe something different, The quality of a person who has received information about a situation and is deciding with complete calm and without urgency what relationship to have with that information. She says, "I'm going to ask you one more time." Her voice is the same as it was, the same level. The same absence of performed quality in either direction, neither aggressively calm nor threateningly quiet. Simply the voice of a person saying what they are saying. Marsh puts down his fork. He turns on the bench toward Bruce with the full commitment of his body, which is a significant physical fact in a space as constrained as a mess hall bench. The full commitment of 215 pounds of a person who has decided that this situation requires the physical dimension to be made explicit. He reaches out and puts his hand on Bruce's shoulder. The hand is large. The grip, when it closes on the fabric of Bruce's jacket at the shoulder, is the grip of a former defensive end who is not thinking carefully about the grip, because the grip is not something he is thinking about at all. It is simply the physical punctuation of a point he is making through the body, the way people make points through their bodies when they have assessed the situation as one where physical punctuation is available to them. 6 seconds. The witnesses will disagree about almost every detail of the next 6 seconds except the number 6 seconds. They agree on 6 seconds because several of them counted. Because human beings in situations of sudden high stimulus sometimes count without deciding to count, the nervous system producing a metronomic function that the conscious mind did not request but finds afterward that it has. 6 seconds. In those 6 seconds the following things happen, described here not in the dramatic slow motion of reconstruction, but in the flat sequence that matches the actual experience of the witnesses, which was not slow motion, but was instead the specific temporal distortion of events that move too fast for real-time processing and that the brain reconstructs afterward from the available data. Marsh's hand closes on Bruce's shoulder. Bruce's left hand comes up, not in the direction of Marsh, in the direction of Marsh's hand. It finds the hand at the wrist with a precision that the witnesses cannot account for given the speed of the movement, makes contact at a specific point along the outer wrist, where the extensor tendons are most accessible and where the mechanical leverage available to a correctly applied pressure is disproportionate to the force required to apply it. Marsh's grip releases, not because he decides to release it, because the specific pressure applied to the specific point on his wrist has sent a signal through the nerve pathway that governs the grip reflex, that the grip reflex receives as a release instruction. He does not experience pain in the sharp localized sense. He experiences the sudden absence of his own grip, the sudden awareness that his hand is no longer doing what he told it to do, which is a more disorienting experience than pain because it has no referent in his previous experience. He has not processed this yet when Bruce moves. The movement is off the bench, not away from Marsh, into the space that the bench geometry creates when two people are seated adjacent to each other on the same side of a long aluminum table. Space that conventional spatial logic says is not a space where significant movement is possible, where the constraints of the bench and the table and the tray and the adjacent seating create a situation that should not allow for what Bruce does in it, should not allow, does not prevent. Bruce's right hand is involved in something that happens at Marsh's center of gravity, at the specific intersection of hip and lower back, where the mechanical structure of an upright seated body is most dependent on the unconscious stabilizing work of the core musculature, work that the core musculature performs automatically and continuously without consulting the conscious mind, and that the conscious mind therefore has no prepared response for addressing when it is suddenly and precisely interrupted. Marsh goes forward, not sideways, not backward. Forward, which is the direction that the geometry of the bench and the specific mechanics of what Bruce's right hand did conspire to make the only direction available. Forward and over the tray that is still on the table in front of the space he was occupying. A controlled forward trajectory that his body follows with the helpless compliance of an object that has been redirected by a force it did not detect in time to counter. He does not hit the table hard. The trajectory is managed. The word managed sounds clinical, and it is clinical. It is the right word. It describes the specific quality of what happened, which is not a throw in the sense of a maximum force technique designed to produce maximum impact, but a redirection, a use of the force that Marsh's own posture and his own committed movement had already generated, guided along a path that his body followed to a conclusion that was not the conclusion he was heading toward 30 seconds ago. He is lying across the table, his tray is displaced, his food is no longer where it was. The coffee that was in his cup is distributed across the table surface in a pattern that several witnesses will describe afterward, with the specific detail that people apply to peripheral things when the central thing is too large to describe immediately. He is unhurt. He is fully conscious. His eyes are open and working, and receiving the information of the mess hall ceiling at close range, receiving it with the processing capacity of a person whose nervous system has just been asked to account for a very large quantity of information in a very short time, and that is working through the accounting with the systematic thoroughness that nervous systems apply to exactly this kind of request. He cannot immediately account for what happened. This is the specific quality of what the witnesses observe in his face in the seconds following. Not pain, not the aftermath of a strike that he felt, and that he can therefore locate in his body as a source of information about what occurred. Something more disorienting than that. The aftermath of something that happened so quickly and with such precision that his body executed the outcome before his nervous system had finished reading the input. He has no felt experience of the cause. He has only the felt experience of the effect. The mess hall has gone quiet. Not the entire mess hall. The section of it that contains the third table from the east wall and the tables immediately adjacent to it, and the people at those tables who were within direct sight line of what just occurred and who have processed it sufficiently to have stopped the activity they were engaged in and directed their full attention toward the far end of the third table, where a person in a navy blue jacket is standing up from the bench and picking up her tray with the deliberate economy of someone who has finished a meal and is preparing to return the tray to the designated return area. 2 of the 400 people in the mess hall this Thursday afternoon will be able to tell you for the rest of their lives exactly what they saw. The rest of the 400 will know that something happened at the far end of the third table, and will have various incomplete and partially accurate accounts of what it was. And one person, a Master Chief Petty Officer named Harold Yuen, who has been stationed at Yokosuka for 6 years, and who has a serious background in martial arts, and who was seated at the adjacent table with a sightline to the entire sequence, and who was watching it from the moment the tray was displaced, has a complete account, a frame-by-frame account, an account that he will sit with for several hours after lunch before attempting to describe it to anyone. Not because he is uncertain about what he saw, but because he is uncertain about whether the language available to him is adequate to describe it, without the description becoming smaller than the thing it is describing. He describes it later that evening to another Master Chief, a man named Torres who has 20 years in the Navy and who was not in the mess hall and who receives Yuen's account with the skepticism that 20 years of accumulated experience with implausible stories has installed in him. Yuen says, "I have been studying martial arts for 18 years. I have seen fighters. I have trained with people who are genuinely good. What I saw this afternoon was something that does not fit inside what I know about what is possible at that speed and in that space." Torres says, "How big was this person?" Yuen says, "I told you. Small. Maybe 140 pounds, Torres says, and the sailor." Yuen says, 215 at minimum. Former football player. Torres is quiet for a moment, then, and 6 seconds. Yuen says, "I counted." Bruce returns her tray. She walks toward the mess hall exit at the pace of a person who has finished lunch and is returning to whatever comes next in her day. The pace that carries no additional information beyond that does not hurry and does not make a statement about not hurrying, that simply moves at the speed appropriate to someone for whom this corridor connects 2 parts of an afternoon and not to a defining moment that she will carry for years. She is almost at the exit when Yuen catches up to her. He has left his table and moved through the mess hall at the brisk pace of someone who has made a decision and is executing it before the decision can be reconsidered. He reaches her just inside the exit doors, and when she turns to face him, he makes the same assessment that everyone makes: small, civilian, and the additional category that his 18 years of martial arts study adds to the general assessment, which is something I do not have a complete account of. He says, I was watching from the adjacent table. I need to ask you something. Bruce looks at him. The quality of the look is the quality that people who have encountered Bruce Lee's attention describe consistently across many different contexts as the quality of being seen by someone who is genuinely looking rather than registering. She waits. UN says, what was the wrist technique? The first thing before anything else happened. Because I have an 18-year background and I know the wrist techniques, and what I saw did not match anything in what I know. Bruce considers him for a moment. She says, you counted. It is not a question. She already knows he counted. He says, 6 seconds. She says, 5.8? But close. He looks at her. Something crosses his face that is not quite a smile, and not quite recognition, and not quite the particular expression of a person who has just understood something that was previously unclear, but that contains elements of all three. He says, you are Bruce Lee. She says, yes. He says nothing for a moment. He is a man with 18 years of martial arts study and 20 years of naval service and a complete account of what happened at the far end of the third table from the east wall. And he is standing inside the exit doors of the Building 14 mess hall at Yokosuka Naval Base on a Thursday afternoon in August, processing the specific information that the person he has been running all of his assessment categories against for the last several minutes is Bruce Lee, and that his assessment categories did not produce this result, and that this failure of his categories is itself the most significant piece of information the afternoon has provided. He says, the wrist technique. She says, find the point where the grip reflex is mechanical rather than voluntary. On the outer wrist, below the joint, where the extensor pathway runs closest to the surface. Apply pressure that speaks to the nerve rather than the muscle. The muscle will resist. The nerve will listen. He is quiet for a moment, absorbing this. She says, the grip released before he knew it was releasing. That is the point. If he knows it is releasing, he can resist the release. The technique has to arrive before the knowing UN says, and the rest, the 6 seconds, she says, when someone commits their body to a direction the body follows. I did not throw him. I found the direction his body had already committed to and gave it a path. He went where he was already going. I only confirmed the destination. He looks at her for a long moment. Then he says, may I ask you something else? She waits. He says he grabbed you. You put him across the table, you picked up your tray and returned it and walked out. At no point did you appear to be anything other than someone finishing lunch. She says, I was finishing lunch. He says, yes. But she says, the situation required a response. The response was given. The response was complete. Lunch continued. He thinks about this. Then, the continuity, the not stopping. That is something separate from the technique, she says. It is the same thing. Technique that requires you to stop being what you are in order to use it is technique that does not yet fully belong to you. When what you know is fully yours, you do not stop being what you are to use it. You are what you are, and what you know is part of that. The situation arrived. The situation was addressed. The situation ended. All of that happened inside the same afternoon. He says, I have been studying martial arts for 18 years, and I have not heard anyone say that in a way that made it real before. She says, because most of the saying happens outside the situation. Inside the situation, it is not something you say. It is something you are or you are not. He nods slowly. The nod of someone receiving something they will need time to fully integrate. But that has already changed the shape of something. She says, the wrist technique. Practice it on yourself first. Find the point on your own wrist where the pressure changes from muscular to neural. You will know when you find it. Then you will understand why it works before you try it on anyone else. Understanding why is the only reason it works. Without the understanding, it is a movement. With the understanding, it is a technique. She pushes through the exit door. The afternoon air comes in through the opening, salt and heat, and the distant presence of Tokyo Bay, and then the door closes, and she is in the August afternoon moving toward the parking area and the drive back to Tokyo and whatever the afternoon contains beyond this. Ewan stands inside the exit doors of Building 14 for a longer time than he will afterward account for accurately when he tries to reconstruct the specific duration. He is thinking about the wrist point. He is thinking about the 6 seconds and the continuity and the tray returned to the designated return area by a person for whom the 6 seconds were contained within the afternoon rather than being the afternoon. He is thinking about 18 years of serious study and the specific quality of what those 18 years allowed him to observe this afternoon and what the 18 years were unable to prepare him to produce even as an observer, unable to prepare him to describe with the precision the observation deserved. He is thinking about what she said. Inside the situation, it is not something you say. It is something you are or you are not. He goes back to his table. His food is cold. He eats it anyway. The mess hall resumes its 400 conversations at the volume produced by 400 people in a space whose ceiling and walls were engineered for function rather than acoustics, the specific ambient pressure that makes sustained attention slightly more demanding than it would be elsewhere. Petty Officer First Class Daniel Marsh is at a different table. He arrived there from the table he left without fully accounting for how he came to leave it. He is eating in the specific silence of a person who has had an experience he does not yet have a framework for, and who is eating in the time that framework is being constructed. He is unhurt. He knows this. His body is working. His food is in front of him. The afternoon is continuing. He will not tell anyone what happened for 3 days. When he tells it, he will tell it to a friend from his unit who he trusts, in the specific tentative way that people tell things they are not certain they experience the way they remember experiencing them, with the qualifications and the hesitations that a person attaches to an account they are simultaneously telling and questioning. The friend will ask, "And you never found out who she was?" Marsh will say, "No." He will say this because he does not know who Bruce Lee is in the way that would allow him to connect the account he is giving to the name. He knows what Bruce Lee is, in the same approximate way that he knew it before lunch on Thursday, which is not the same as knowing who Bruce Lee is in the way that would allow the connection. The connection will arrive 4 months later in December when Enter the Dragon begins its promotional cycle, and the face on the promotional materials is the face from the mess hall, and Marsh is standing in front of a movie poster in a shop in Yokosuka, and the poster and the face and the Thursday afternoon in August arrange themselves in his mind in a sequence that produces in him a silence that lasts several seconds, and that the friend standing next to him will ask about. He will say, "Nothing. I just recognized someone." He will not explain further. He will carry it the way people carry things that altered something in them, quietly and thoroughly. The thing becoming over years less a story he tells and more a fact about the world that he knows to be true because he was on the bench when it happened, because he felt the grip release before he knew it was releasing, because he went where he was already going and someone simply confirmed the destination. 6 seconds, the afternoon continued. It always continued. That was the whole point.